Welcome in, everyone. Ready to dive into some Brazilian wine?
I'm ready when you are.
Awesome. All right, so this time you sent me a whole bunch of articles and research on, well, one specific place in Brazil,
Yep, Flores da Cunha.
Flores da Cunha. So tell me, what makes it so special? I mean, besides the awesome nickname, Land of the Rooster, I mean, come on, that's pretty cool.
Oh, yeah. That nickname has a great story behind it, too, but, well, it's really the wine.
Okay, let's back up just a bit. Where even is this place?
So, picture southern Brazil, okay?
Yeah.
You've got all these rolling hills and valleys. It's really
Okay,
beautiful.
I'm picturing it, yeah.
That's the Serra Gaúcha, and Flores da Cunha is right smack dab in the middle of it. Up in the hills, too, about 700 meters above sea level.
Wow. Okay. So how does all that being up in the hills, I mean, how does that play into the whole winemaking thing?
Well, that's the thing about terroir, right?
Yeah.
It all makes a difference. So, higher altitude means sunny days, which the grapes love, but also those cool mountain nights.
So it gets chilly.
Chilly enough to slow down the ripening process. So the grapes, they get to develop more concentrated flavors,
Yeah.
but they don't lose their acidity,
And so it's like a perfect balance.
Exactly. The warm days bring the sweetness, and the cool nights keep the grapes all crisp and vibrant.
Man, it sounds beautiful.
Oh, it is. But speaking of balance, there's also the climate to think about. Now, this is southern Brazil, so we're not talking tropical rainforest here.
Right, right. More like wine country weather.
Yeah, more like it. It's subtropical, actually, but with an oceanic influence. You get good rainfall throughout the year, keeps the vines happy.
Right.
But, and here's the kicker, the temperature, it really swings, not just between day and night, but across the seasons too.
Interesting.
That fluctuation, it's like a workout for the vines. It stresses them just enough to, well, make the flavors really pop.
I can only imagine. Sun, cool air, hint of that Atlantic breeze all bottled up.
Hmm.
Okay, now one thing that really jumped out at me in the research is this basalt-rich soil. Basalt, isn't that like volcanic rock?
It is. It's pretty amazing stuff.
So how does volcanic rock make for delicious wine?
Well, basalt, it's loaded with minerals, you see.
Yeah.
And the vines. They just soak it all up.
And that ends up in the wine.
Exactly. So you
Yeah.
get these layers of complexity in the wine, a real minerality to it. And bonus, they tend to age beautifully, like over time. Even more nuanced flavors
Oh,
develop.
amazing. It's like every little thing, down to the rocks, contributes to the final product.
Right. But of course, there's more to the story than just nature. We can't forget about the people.
You mean the folks who actually make the wine, right?
Exactly. In Flores da Cunha, you can't talk about wine without talking about the Italian immigrants who brought their winemaking traditions with them.
It seems like every great wine region has some kind of cool immigration story.
Well, this one is pretty cool. Picture this. Late 19th century, families arriving from Italy, bringing with them generations of winemaking know-how.
Centuries-old knowledge.
And they had to adapt it all to this new terroir, this new land.
Wow. So it's like a fusion of cultures. Old world meets, well, Brazil.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head.
I'm curious, how did the industry itself grow? I mean, did they start small, just making enough for themselves?
You know it. At first, it was all about family and friends sharing a bottle here and there. But then words started to get around. People realized these wines, they were special.
So it went from family gatherings to, like, a real industry.
It did. They started trying out new grape varietals, modernizing their wineries, and eventually, international recognition.
From family vineyards to the world stage. Awesome story. And speaking of grapes, we got to talk about the actual wine they're making. I mean, the variety in the articles you sent me was incredible. Reds, whites, a whole rainbow.
I know, right? It's amazing the range they have. But you want to talk about some specific varietals.
I do. Let's get into what makes Flores da Cunha's wines stand out.
All right, let's start with the reds. They've really got a handle on some classic international grapes, but with that unique, Flores da Cunha twist, like Merlot.
Ooh, Merlot. Already a fan. So what's different about the Merlot?
Okay, so Merlot, it's known for being smooth, approachable. But here, it's got this extra depth. Still those plum and cherry notes, but way more complex than you might think.
I see. And I bet it goes great with, like, a classic Italian meal, pasta.
You know it. That Italian influence runs deep. Think a rich ragu sauce, homemade pasta.
Stop, I'm getting hungry. Okay, what about Cabernet Sauvignon?
Cabernet Sauvignon. It keeps its boldness for sure. You'll get those blackcurrant cedar notes, but there's this structure to it from the tannins and the basalt soil. Adds another level of complexity.
So a big, age-worthy Cabernet.
You got it. If you like to put a few bottles down in the cellar, This is the one. Now, Tanit, are you familiar with Tanit?
Honestly, not really.
So Tanit's known for being big, powerful,
Yeah.
but what they've done here in Flores da Cunha is amazing. They've managed to, like, smooth it out. It's still got that structure, but it's elegant, too.
How do they do that?
Clay soils. Some parts of the region have more clay, and that helps to soften those tannins. So you end up with a wine that's both intense, A&D refined, think dark fruit, a little spice, and a long finish.
Wow. I'm going to have to try that. It sounds like they really dialed it in.
They did. And those aren't the only reds they grow. You'll find Pinot Noir, too, more on the lighter side, delicate, floral. And then there's Enchilada, which they often use in blends just to add a little extra color and structure.
Okay, see, this is what I love. The variety, the different approaches, it shows how dynamic the region is.
Exactly. It's not just one type of wine, one flavor profile. It's a whole spectrum.
Okay, so we've done the reds, but I gotta know about the whites. Big fan of crisp, refreshing whites, especially Sauvignon Blanc.
Oh, you're going to love what they're doing with Sauvignon Blanc here. Imagine, like, the brightest sunshine bottled up. That's what it tastes like.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What kind of flavors are we talking?
Think passion fruit, lots of lime zest, and a little hint of fresh herbs. Seriously refreshing, especially on a warm day.
Oh, yeah, I can see that. And now for a classic Chardonnay, buttery. What kind of Chardonnay are they making in Flores da Cunha?
It's not just one thing, which is what's so cool. You get your classic citrus, green apple, but there's this minerality too, from the terroir. Some producers do oak aging, but it's subtle. Just a hint of creaminess and spice.
I see, so it's more about showcasing the grape, not the oak.
Exactly. It's elegant, balanced, and it goes great with, seafood, lighter pasta dishes. Very versatile.
Right, now Riesling. I always think of Germany when I hear Riesling. So how did it end up in Brazil?
Riesling actually loves the cool climate and the basalt soil they have here, and the result, wow, it's like this explosion of floral aromas, citrus, a touch of honey.
Sounds delicious.
Oh, it is. And they age beautifully, too. Over
Wow.
time, those honey notes become even more pronounced.
So a Riesling that can really stand the test of time. I like it. And there's more, right?
Oh, yeah. There's Pinot Grigio, which is like the definition of refreshing,
Mm-hmm.
perfect for an aperitivo. Then you've got Moscato, all those sweet, aromatic flavors, almost like summer fruits in a glass. And if you're feeling adventurous, Gewürztraminer.
The Gewürztraminer, now that's a name I haven't heard in a while. What's that like?
It's definitely unique, exuberant, spicy, like unlike anything you've probably had before.
I'm starting to understand why they call it a mosaic of colors and aromas. It's incredible.
Right. So much to discover.
Before we go on, I have to ask, how does that whole subtropical climate thing with the different seasons and temperatures, how does that play into the final product?
I think it all comes back to that balance. Warm days for ripening, cool nights for preserving acidity, like nature's giving the winemakers a helping hand.
That's pretty cool. Now, I also noticed a lot of talk about sustainability in these articles.
Oh, yeah, they're really taking it seriously here. Respecting the land, making sure it's healthy for future generations.
I like that. So what are they doing?
A lot of wineries are using integrated pest management, which means fewer pesticides. And they're big on water conservation, composting, things like that.
So taking care of the environment while making delicious wine, that's a win-win.
Exactly. It's all connected, right? All right, so we've talked terroir, grapes, philosophy.
Right. But now I want to see the action. How do those grapes actually become the wines we're talking about?
Okay, let's follow those grapes on their journey. Let's head to the winery.
Mm.
So you get to the winery, and it is buzzing. Harvest time is like all hands on deck.
Yeah.
And in Flores da Cunha, timing, it is everything.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. They're out there constantly monitoring the grapes, checking sugar levels, the acidity, even the pH.
To figure out when to pick them.
Exactly. It's like part science, part art. You got to know when the grapes are at their peak.
What if, like, a storm comes in or it gets super hot all of a sudden?
That's where experience comes in. Those winemakers, they've seen it all. They know how to adjust, maybe harvest a little earlier or wait a bit longer, depending. It's all about protecting the grapes, making sure they're perfect.
Makes sense. And a lot of them still do hand harvesting, right?
Oh, yeah, a lot of them. It's about that extra level of care, making sure only the best grapes make the cut.
So the grapes are picked, they make it to the winery. What happens next?
First step, crushing. Got to release that juice, right?
Right, so just squeeze them all.
Pretty much. But for red wines, this is where things get interesting. You leave the skins in with the juice during fermentation.
Wait, really? Why?
It's called maceration. And it's how you get all that color, flavor, and tannins from those skins.
Tannins. That's what makes red wine taste like dry.
Exactly. Tannins give the wine structure, and the longer you macerate, the bolder, the more tannic the wine's going to be.
So it's a balancing act again.
Always. Now, one more thing about red wine fermentation.
Yeah.
It often goes through something called malolactic fermentation.
Malolactic. That sounds complicated.
It's a natural process, actually. Basically, after the first fermentation, which is all about the alcohol, there's this second one. It converts malic acid, which is like sharp, into lactic acid, which is much softer.
So it mellows out the wine.
Exactly. Gives it a smoother, rounder feel. And then, after all that, there's aging.
Ah, yes. The aging. One of the articles talked about oak barrels. So what does aging in oak do to the wine?
Oh, it adds so much. Think vanilla, spice, maybe some toasty notes, even a little coconut sometimes.
Coconut from wood.
It's wild, right? It all comes from compounds in the oak that seep into the wine over time.
Wow. And I bet different kinds of oak add different flavors.
You bet. And how long you age it, whether the barrels are new or used, it all makes a difference. Some reds are also aged in stainless steel tanks, to keep things fresh and fruity. It just depends on the style they're going for.
So many options. Okay, what about the whites? Is it the same process?
Kinda not. With white wines, it's all about keeping them fresh, delicate. So they press the grapes gently, just to get the juice, and they usually ferment at cooler temperatures in stainless steel.
So no soaking the skins with whites?
Nope, not usually,
Yeah.
unless they're making orange wine, which is a whole other thing. But for most white wines in Flores da Cunha, it's all about that bright, fruity character. Some might see a little oak, like Chardonnay, but it's always subtle.
I can't wait to try some of these. Okay, now we got to talk sparkling wine. Flores da Cunha does the traditional method, right? Like champagne.
They do. It's a much longer process, but worth it.
So walk me through it.
All right, so first, fermentation happens like normal. Then they bottle the wine, but they add a little mixture of sugar and yeast.
And that's what creates the bubbles.
Bingo. But that's just the start. Then they lay those bottles down horizontally for like months, even years. And they're in contact with all those spent yeast cells.
Why do they do that?
It's called sur-lie aging, and it adds all this amazing complexity. You know those creamy, yeasty, biscuity notes you get in good sparkling wine? That's from sur-lie.
Huh, I had no idea. It's way more involved than I thought.
Oh yeah, it's a process. Then they have to riddle the bottles, which is basically turning them slowly to get all the yeast down to the neck.
And then they pop the cork.
Well, not quite. They freeze the neck, remove the yeast plug, top up the bottle, and then cork it. It's pretty amazing, actually, how they keep those bubbles in.
It's like a science experiment. Okay, so we've followed the grapes from vine to bottle, seen the whole process.
Time to taste.
Let's do it. I'm excited to hear what all those different processes create in the glass.
Well, why don't we start with the reds? You mentioned you were a Merlot fan, so.
Perfect. Bring on the Merlot.
So Merlot in Flores da Cunha, it's like the classic Merlot flavors you love, but with more depth. You still get the plums, the cherries, but it's richer, more complex.
And those tannins.
They're there, but they're soft, integrated, makes it really food-friendly.
I'm thinking like a cozy night in, some pasta, a glass of this Merlot.
Sounds perfect. All right, now how about something bolder? Cabernet Sauvignon.
Bring it on.
This Cabernet, it's all about power and structure. You get those black currant cedar notes, but they're amplified here. And the tannins, oh yeah, they're there, giving it that backbone, that grip.
A wine to really savor.
Exactly. And it can age for a long time, too. Now, ready for that tannin?
I'm a little intimidated, but yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so imagine those deep, dark fruit flavors. Then add some spice and those firm tannins. But remember, they've softened it up here, so it's not overwhelming. It's actually quite elegant.
Elegant and powerful.
That's Flores da Cunha tannin for you. Now, onto the whites. You were excited to try the Sauvignon Blanc.
Oh yeah, that sunshine in a bottle you were talking about?
Get ready for a flavor explosion. Passion fruit, lime zest, a touch of herbs. It's like summer in a glass.
I bet it's perfect with seafood.
You know it. Grilled fish, shrimp, anything light and fresh. Now, Chardonnay, I know you were curious about how they do it here.
I am. It's such a versatile grape.
Well, in Flores da Cunha, they really focus on elegance and balance. So you get those citrus notes, the green apple, but also this amazing minerality from the soil.
And in the oak.
Some producers use it, but it's always subtle, just to add a little complexity.
I see. So they're letting the grape speak for itself.
Exactly. Now, for another unique expression, let's talk about Riesling.
Oh, yeah. The German grape that found a home in Brazil.
And it's thriving here. It's like they took all the best parts of Riesling and dial them up so you get those floral aromas, the bright citrus, the touch of
But
honey,
they age as well, right?
like a dream.
Mm-hmm.
Those honeyed notes just get richer over time. Now, we can't forget about the other whites. Pinot Grigio, Moscato, Gewürztraminer.
So many choices.
Each one is a different experience. You want something light and refreshing. Pinot Grigio, sweet and fruity. Moscato. And for something totally different, that's spicy Gewürztraminer.
It's amazing the range they have here. And we can't forget those sparkling wines made in the traditional method.
Oh, right. Those are special. You get the fine bubbles, but also all those complex flavors from that long aging process.
Brioche, citrus, toasted nuts.
Exactly. Perfect for a celebration.
Yeah.
It's incredible how much they're doing in Flores da Cunha. It's truly a wine lover's paradise.
It is. But you know what I'm realizing? It's about more than just the wine itself. It's about the whole experience.
Absolutely. It's the vineyards, the wineries, the people, the culture. It's all connected.
So let's talk about that. Let's take a little virtual tour of some of these amazing wineries.
Okay, first up, we got to go way back in time. Let's visit Luis Argenta.
Luis Argenta.
It's one of the oldest wineries in the region. Goes back to 1925. They've got beautiful architecture. They do tours. You can see their whole process.
I love places with history.
Oh, this one's got it in spades. Now, if you want something really stunning visually, you got to check out Casa Venturini.
What's special about Casa Venturini?
The building itself, it's like Italian-inspired architecture, but modern. And they do all sorts of events, like a great festival. It is. Very festive. Now, if sustainability is your thing, you'll love Salvatore.
Salvatore. What makes them so sustainable?
They're all about organic and biodynamic practices, really working with nature to create their wines.
That's awesome.
It is. All right, now for something a little more intimate, there's Familia Beber.
Familia Beber. Is that a family-run place?
Oh, yeah. Small, family-owned. They've been passing down their traditions for generations. You get a really authentic experience there.
I love that. Now, for something a little more, I don't know, luxurious.
Oh, you got to go to Monte Reale. It's up on a hill
Yeah.
with incredible views. They do tastings, gourmet lunches, the whole 9 yards.
Okay, that sounds amazing. Sipping some sparkling wine, overlooking the vineyards.
It's magical. But, beyond the wineries themselves, there's so much more to experience.
Like what?
Well, imagine walking through the vineyards, really feeling the land.
It must be so peaceful.
It is. And the food. They have these amazing restaurants where you can pair the wines with local dishes.
Oh, stop. You're making me hungry again.
And there's more. You can go on vineyard walks, even take cooking classes, learn how to make traditional Italian dishes, pair them with the perfect wines.
It's like a full-on sensory experience.
Exactly. It's about immersing yourself in the culture of Flores da Cunha, feeling it all. It's a place that gets under your skin, It's not just a wine region, it's an experience.
It really does sound like an escape, like a place to just slow down, enjoy the simple things, beautiful scenery, good company, amazing food, and of course, fantastic wine. What more could you ask for?
It's a good reminder, isn't it?
Mm.
Wine. It's not just a drink, it's a whole way of life, connected to the land, the people, the traditions.
I think that's what I'm loving about this deep dive into Flores da Cunha. It's like there's so much more to it than just, popping open a bottle. There's a whole story there waiting to be discovered.
And we haven't even talked about the roosters yet. You mentioned those rooster statues in your notes, the land of the rooster thing.
Oh, right. Yeah, I was curious about that. It's such a unique nickname. What's the story there?
So those rooster statues, they're actually more than just decorations. They're like symbols of good luck, prosperity, even fertility.
Really?
Yeah, it's an old Italian tradition, goes way back. And when the immigrants came to Flores da Cunha, they brought that tradition with them.
It's cool how those traditions have stuck around, become part of the culture. I'm definitely going to have to see those rooster statues for myself if I ever make it down there.
Oh, you should. It's one of those little things that just adds to the charm of the place. It's funny. When we started this deep dive, I knew Flores da Cunha made great wine.
Yeah.
But I had no idea how much there was to learn about the region, the history, the people.
Me too. And I'm already craving a glass of that Sauvignon Blanc we were talking about, sitting on a patio overlooking the vineyards.
Sounds like a plan. Who knows, maybe one day we'll get to do that together.
Cheers to that. But before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. Imagine, just for a minute, that you had the chance to make your own WN wine in Flores da Cunha.
Ooh, I like this.
What kind of wine would it be? What grape would you choose? Red, white, sparkling? What would your wine's story be?
Would be a big, bold red, meant for aging.
Hmm.
Or maybe a light, refreshing white for those hot summer days. So many possibilities.
And would you stick with the traditional methods, the Italian way of doing things, or would you get creative, experiment a little, try something new?
Maybe it's a wine meant for sharing with family and friends, or one that's just for you to savor while watching the sunset over those rolling hills.
So keep dreaming about that perfect wine. Maybe one day it'll become a reality. And hey, if it does, we'll be the first ones in line to try it.
Absolutely. Well, I think that about wraps it up for our deep dive into Flores da Cunha. I hope everyone enjoyed the journey. It's been a real pleasure for me.
Same here. And who knows, maybe this is just the beginning of our Brazilian wine adventure. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.